We got Gators Breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Here we are during the season, of course, and on Monday nights, it is co-host Will Miles at Will Miles SEC. Catch him at readandreaction.com and Read and Reaction on YouTube as well. Will, Gators get a victory over Central Florida, and good work last week on that, by the way. So, Gators over UCF. In a game, as I said, Florida shouldn't be in the situation where you find yourself an underdog to UCF, but Florida did find themselves an underdog after opening up the week as the favorites, but then get the victory there. Not really in doubt, even though maybe a little frustrating in the second half there for the Gators. I broke it down, you broke it down. We'll certainly get into it. We'll hear from Billy Napier on this Monday and kind of turn the page to Tennessee a little bit too. But kind of the theme, Will, is Can Billy Napier, can this Gator team under Billy Napier ride some momentum? And if that momentum continues, the narrative is going to change a little bit towards Billy Napier right now where this program is. But certainly sitting at 3-2 right now for the Gators in a much better spot than would have been had you taken one to the chin against the Knights.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's funny. You and I were talking behind the scenes about what we thought was going to happen in this game last week. And I was sort of like, I don't know what's going to happen, man. I don't know what to – I thought it would be close. And so if you'd have told me before the game 24-13, it was done, taking it, completely happy, 100% happy. I will not complain, 24-13. I will have zero complaints. And then they were up 24-3 at the half. And so, yes, there are things that we can pick apart. And certainly there are things that Florida can improve on, and I think all of us know that. And
pick apart. It is not nitpicking.
No, there are definitely things that need to improve, and I think even Napier after the game in his post-game press conference, I'm sure today, talked about some of those things that they need to improve. But this game wasn't close, right? I mean, this game was something where 24-3, it was completely in hand. For the first time in what feels like a decade, the Florida defense actually had control of a game, and there was nothing that Central Florida could do. And, KJ Jefferson came out in the swamp and embarrassed Florida last year. And quite honestly, the Gators returned the favor this week against Central Florida. Jefferson was terrible in this one. He didn't run the ball at all. He was in negative yardage overall. Running again, if you'd have told me before the game if you'd have told me they were going to keep him in negative yardage, I would have said Florida wins big. Yeah. And if you'd have told me that he was in negative yardage, I would have said you're delusional. And there's no possible way KJ Jefferson, after what we've seen from some of the other quarterbacks who can run against Florida, and including what he did last year, there's no way that KJ Jefferson would have negative yardage. And certainly Florida was able to do that, was able to get behind the line of scrimmage a lot. There were a lot of plays made, a lot of tackles for loss in this particular game. Just a lot of really good things that you look at that had they finished in the third and fourth quarter, it would be probably a much different story in terms of the optimism that we would come out of it with. But again, I go back to what I said at the beginning, which is if you'd have told me 24-13 before this game, I would have taken it in a heartbeat, turned the page, move on to Tennessee. Hey, that's given where Florida's program is, that was a good win. But again, you're supposed to beat the Florida directional schools. That's really what you're supposed to do. And so beating Central Florida is good. You're supposed to beat Central Florida, but I'm not ready to celebrate yet. You got to start beating good teams in the SEC before I'm going to start, patting people on the back and saying congratulations.
Yeah, I know. We'll get into that too. But yeah, Jonathan G does bring up a good point about the Napier part. He goes, Napier was hype after the game in the locker room. You can see the players want to play for him. So I think this win was our moment to turn a corner. I won't go that far yet to say that's what I think it means, but I do think it means, to Jonathan's point, after all the noise of Miami and Texas A&M, look, I know a lot of people don't want to hear this because, look, in the end, even for me, it does mean wins and losses. But, yeah, this team hasn't thrown the towel in. And they had to buy into whatever changed with the defense during the bye week. Part of that's UCF, a part of that is it didn't matter who was on the other side of this defense recently. They were going to give up some rushing yards. They were going to give up some explosive plays. And no, there was buy-in during the bye week, and you could see that play out on the field. So yeah, certainly I do think it should be pointed out there with the word holdouts and the red shirts and all of that taking over college football right now. For Florida right now, they're still, even with injuries, I know people will throw those words out with some of the injuries and the guys that didn't play, but certainly see that the players, are still trying to give this fan base something to cheer about when they can.
Yeah, I mean, look, we said that last week, or I said it last week, that Florida could have rolled over and played dead against Mississippi State on the road in an early start, and they didn't. They came out and they beat the Bulldogs pretty convincingly. They could have come out and been tentative to start this one. They weren't. They came out, went right down the field. Didn't even have an explosive on that opening play. 4 of 4 on third down, and I think 2 of 9 from there on out. But they executed, right? That opening script, they were able to execute. They were able to go down the field, turn that into a touchdown. That's not something that we've seen from Florida teams under Billy Napier much at all.
And just first time this year, a score on the first drive of the game.
Well, I mean, they've been behind like considerably by the time they've gotten out there in the first quarter in some of these games. So look, a lot of really nice things that we can take away from this and say, hey, there was some real growth. I mean, obviously Napier talked about, they had it on the telecast, and I think he even reiterated afterwards that, that practice was really competitive this past week, and that, they're going to try to model that moving forward. And that's all great.
Right.
But again, like, should it take you this long to get to that point? And, and so it is one of those, like, Billy, just be quiet. Don't admit you didn't know that was the way to run a practice. Just make the change and actually run the practice that way. So again, yes, very, I am glad they got the win. I will never root against my team. I would rather them get the win than get the loss. I know there were some people who are sort of like rooting for change, and I'm not in that camp. Mm-hmm. I want to see Florida win. I'd love to see them turn it around, quite honestly. But again, I think holistically we need to look at this and say, you've beaten Central Florida, Mississippi State, and Samford. Those are the 3 teams that we put in the W column to start the year. So you've done what you were supposed to do against those teams. And the Miami and Texas A&M games were kind of in what I would have qualified as toss-up categories, right? Those were ones where if you're going to have a good year, you're probably going to have to win those ones. If you're going to struggle, those are ones that are probably going to go back in the other direction. Now, look, Florida State on the back end looks like it should be in the W category now too. And I will say that I'm not sure that the Noles could have beaten Central Florida or can beat Central Florida, Now, granted, Florida State won't be in a bowl game, but if those two were to play each other, I'm not sure that Florida State would win that game. I think this team,
neither one might be in a bowl game.
But I also just watched KJ Jefferson, and I'm not sure he's better than DJ Uiagalelei. So we'll sort of see, right? So that one on the back end again is one that now we can probably put in the W category. LSU seems to have taken a bit of a step back from where they were last year as well. Defensively, they haven't gotten much better, and now you've got Garrett Nussmeier instead of Jaden Daniels. In fact, Jaden Daniels still lighting things up for Washington in the NFL. So there are some opportunities.
Tennessee coming off the loss to Arkansas. I mean, that's going to be talked about all week,
Yeah, well, there's a difference between going to Mississippi State on the road and going to Tennessee on the road. So, I'm in the exact same place that you've probably been, and quite honestly, I've been for a while now, which is it's time to prove it. Right? Like if culture and buy-in and these guys not opting out and all that stuff gives you better cohesion, then go win the game at Tennessee. Go win the game against Kentucky. And I think we'll forgive competent-looking losses to Georgia and Texas if the rest of the games are wins or the team is looking really, really good in those things. But, look, there's still some stuff that needs to improve, and it's not just one position or 2 positions. But I will say it was a lot of fun to actually have a defense that can get a stop. Like it turns out that's kind of fun to watch. Yeah. Like we always talk about all the points that Florida fans expect and all that sort of stuff. But you look at those Spurrier teams, those defenses were pretty good. And you look at those Urban Meyer teams in 2006 and 2008, those defenses were ferocious. So there's something to be said for needing to have style points at Florida. But part of the style points is that you don't give up every possible yard that you can to the opposition, and that it's not just hopeless every time you give the ball over. It was really kind of fun to see like guys running in the backfield, sacks, like 3rd down and 12, like not just sitting there going, oh, it's 3rd and 12. This is where we give up 14 yards. Like, it was amazing.
Well, before this stretch started in 2020 of bad defense, we thought a bad defense was 2007 Florida, which you go back and look, we would all sign up for in a heartbeat right now. But at least right now. Not overall. We know everything needs to be better than that 2007 defense as well, but that's what we thought bad defense was, not what we've seen the last 4 years. So, yeah, as you said, that was, given who the opponent was, UCF not, their best version of themselves in recent years, but still a Big 12 opponent, still one who, if you were not ready to play, we'll get into it, could have certainly taken advantage of you. But no, a defense that finally showed up, and you're right. It was fun to see that for a change. So, yeah, we'll get into all that. Billy Napier speaks more on that as well. So we'll get into kind of the momentum and how the narrative can change coming up here for the Gators. But first, everybody hit that like button, subscribe right here on Gators Breakdown, but smash that like button while you're right here on YouTube where you're watching us live. Everybody, thank you so much for the comments going on right now as well. And then subscribe right here on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube as well. And you can keep that conversation going. Gators Breakdown Plus. Link is in the description to keep it going there. And one more message. I don't know when everybody's listening to this, but if you're in the state of Florida, especially down Central Florida, Tampa area, everybody heed the warnings. Yeah, get out if you can. And this is a scary one right there. So certainly, I won't spend too much time on it. I know a lot of you probably just want to get away from it mentally, but certainly want to send the condolences and the warnings. Get out there. This one's not going to be pretty. So everybody, make your preparations and get ready to bunker down if you have to, or evacuate if you have to. But we all know you got family down in that area as well. So certainly, while you're up in Philadelphia, you still have to have the concerns of a hurricane barreling down on Florida.
Yeah, somebody who's got a boat needs to tell me if they can come get my mother-in-law when this thing's over, because she's stubborn. I'm not sure she's going to bail, and I'm just sort of hoping that this thing peters out while it's over the ocean. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen. And we've been talking about like when the storm hits Tampa, what will it look like? And unfortunately, it looks like that's going to happen. And hopefully, everybody just heeds the warnings, gets to where they can be safe, and stuff can be replaced, but people can't. So get the hell out of there.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, let's get into it right here. We'll talk some Gators football right here for you this week, getting you ready. Kind of post UCF, looking ahead to Tennessee right here. Let's hear from Billy Napier. He looks back at UCF and looking for consistency and also preparing for what's to come.
I'm very appreciative of our players and the staff in terms of their leadership. Not only last week, but I think throughout the open date, just the mentality that we showed up and played with early. I do think we took a step forward on defense. We played a good half of football on offense, and then obviously can perform much better in the second half. And in the kicking game, we continue to do a lot of good things. So definitely a step forward. I know you'll have other questions about that, but, again, I do think that it's important for us to hit the reset button and try to do that with some consistency going forward. And as I said before, if we want to be a consistent contender here and have a championship caliber team, we're going to have to play championship caliber defense. Pleased with the direction there.
Won 2 in a row, but I guess it's safe to say you're stepping up a little bit of competition this week. What would it mean, just from a confidence standpoint, to go up there and win, as far as just the whole, nothing will shut down a lot of noise anyway?
Yeah, no, I think, we have to live in the world of preparing for competition. I think obviously we know the implications. We understand what it would do for the program or for this team, but I think this is a big game. This is, Florida, Tennessee on the road, and certainly a lot on the line. So I think for our team, again, you got to get back to, we are in training for competition, right? We are in the process of preparing, and we have to go about that the right way. When we've done it the right way, I think we've got a good result, self-discipline in terms of the things we do off the field, our practice habits, the focus and intensity on the field, and then just continue to prepare all the way up until we kick that thing off. So, and look, it takes hundreds of people to do that. We get to play 11 at a time on game day, but today we'll have 250 plus people that contribute to how we practice and how we prepare. And I think ultimately everybody's got a responsibility to do it. You want to do the best you can do for the team. I think if we got a lot of people doing that, it gives us a better chance to have success.
Well, there we go. Looking back, looking ahead just a little bit, and kind of the, what you kind of have to get ready for. We all know the schedule gets harder coming up. This was kind of the cutoff point of, we knew this part of Florida's schedule. And everybody kind of looked towards November a bit just because of how many games in a row were so difficult. But this was, you had a line between UCF and Tennessee, because first of all, you were starting a string of SEC games, but at the same time, again, we knew there was a different level between UCF and Tennessee even coming into the season. So, yes, certainly we've already discussed something to build on maybe in preparation for this, but maybe some confidence, starts right here in getting ready. But, momentum, I think we can take this some different ways, but momentum on defense, I think we will start there. But what would you take from what Napier had to say on that part?
Well, so I think momentum is a fickle lady, especially in the Billy Napier era, right? I mean, you had the win over Utah to start his career at Florida, and then they go and lay an egg against Kentucky right afterwards. You've got the win against Tennessee last year, and then they lay an egg a couple of weeks later against Kentucky. Seems to be a common thread. So we do have Kentucky coming up, so that's probably bad news. You've got the wins over Vanderbilt and then the win over South Carolina last year, sort of a miracle win over South Carolina, to be honest. They were down multiple scores there in the fourth quarter, were able to come back. And then you got the 5-game losing streak to end last year. So you've been saying, and I think this is really sort of correct in all of this stuff, is prove it. Yep. Right? You can talk about momentum all you want, but there's a difference between beating Central Florida and beating Tennessee on the road. And there's a difference between being together and going out and dominating at home against a team that, quite honestly, from a talent perspective, is inferior to a team that has equal levels of talent and potentially even more talent than you do, and is going to be angry coming off of the loss to Arkansas this past week, right? And the Hogs are not the best team in the world, but they're not the worst team either. They played Oklahoma State pretty close in a game that they probably should have won earlier in the year. If they win that game, Arkansas is ranked right now. So that team is a quality SEC opponent. And I think what Florida has the opportunity to do is to go out to Knoxville and prove that they are also a quality SEC opponent. Thus far, the game against A&M, the game against Miami, has proven that Florida is sort of an also-ran when it comes to the big boys. And also-ran isn't good enough to save Billy Napier's job. Also-ran isn't good enough for the Florida fans, nor should it be. And so this is an opportunity, but Napier has a lot of opportunities coming up, and he's going to have to pass a bunch of those tests, because just because you beat Tennessee doesn't mean you can relax and then get waxed by Kentucky the next day or the next week. Just because you beat, like, even if you beat Tennessee and Kentucky, doesn't mean you can go out and get waxed by Georgia and Texas. Like, there needs to be a progression where, the defense right now for the first 4 games, first 4 FBS games is ranked 85th in the country. So I'm happy that the defense came out and played well. I'm happy that we saw some improvement coming off the bye week. I'm happy that it didn't look completely incompetent. But let's not kid ourselves and say that the 85th ranked defense in the country is something that we should expect to go out and be able to stop this Tennessee team. So if they come out and stop the Tennessee team and replicate the performance, I think you tip your cap to Ron Roberts and Austin Armstrong and Billy Napier and say, okay, they actually did accomplish something. But I'm not ready to allow that to creep into my mind until we're looking in the third quarter and Florida's defense has control over a game against a quality offensive opponent, kind of like Tennessee.
Well, I need last year's Tennessee game to look like this year's Tennessee game. As you said, before I'm starting to feel confident in this defense turning around. And look, do I think they've probably figured some things out to be a better defense? Sure. They still have a long way to go to be where they need to be. And well, just kind of going through this, and you brought it up of how fickle momentum has been under Billy Napier so far. And look, it's a running joke on Discord that we've had on there for a while. I mean, as you mentioned, the win over Utah only to get slaughtered by Kentucky a week later. Last year, that win over Tennessee in the Swamp, only to look lackluster versus Charlotte the very next week, and then take it on the chin against Kentucky again 2 weeks later. And then the off the field, you had all that recruiting momentum 2 summers ago, and you couldn't hang on to that momentum either. So momentum in every sense of the word under Billy Napier hasn't been there. Will Napier hasn't won 3 straight P4, P5 games yet at Florida. He's only won 3 straight games once overall, and that was last season, McNeese, Tennessee, and Charlotte.
I mean, it's hard to win 3 straight games when you have a losing record.
Right. I mean, don't get me wrong. When you break it, you don't have to break it down too much because, the overall record. There's not many chances for it. But, one time last year, McNeese, Tennessee, and Charlotte.
Well, but I mean, this is sort of why I think we're all so gun shy to say anything definitive after the Central Florida win, is that Florida's defense looked much improved in that Utah game in 2 years ago. And they were unable to carry that momentum forward for the rest of the year, and the defense got torched. Florida's defense looked like a completely changed unit last year against Tennessee, right? We expected that to be a game where Florida's defense was probably going to get exploited. And instead, they came out and really stopped the Tennessee offense and made some big plays, got in Joe Milton's face, forced a turnover that was critical in that one. Obviously, I think people are comparing the Central Florida and the Tennessee games from the standpoint of Florida got up big in the game against Tennessee and then sort of coasted for the rest of that one. But at least then it was a quality opponent where you're like, okay, like we'll take that win and we'll coast on this one because that's an okay way to do things.
Even though Tennessee didn't replicate what they were the year before, they still ended up being a pretty good team. Now, it wasn't the Hendon Hooker offense, but it was still a good team overall.
Yeah, well, and I think the bigger point here is that, and this has really sort of been the story of the Billy Napier era so far, is that Florida has to thread a needle in terms of, like, they can't play from behind. Like Graham Mertz, that dink and dunk stuff that's been successful the last couple of weeks, they are not going down the field with Mertz much at all at this point. And all of that sort of stuff is successful when you're up 24-0. Like you can run clock and you can just hold on for dear life and all that sort of stuff. But the minute the third down stopped converting, the offense completely stalled.
Yeah.
And, Mertz had 6 drives. Florida scored 14 points. Lagway had 3 drives, kind of, because they gave him the ball with 48 seconds left in the second quarter, and they scored 10 points. Just makes a beautiful throw that sets up the touchdown that Mertz either can't or won't make. There was one play that I highlighted in my post-game recap where Mertz checked down basically before the ball was snapped. I
know exactly what play you're talking about.
I mean, we all saw it.
It almost looks like a swing past Montreux Johnson. That's how fast the check down came.
It does. So I'm sitting there going, okay, like the fact that he's gone from alternating drives against A&M to now 2 out of every 3, and that Lagway keeps getting the ball with 40 seconds left in the second. I mean, literally, if you take that Texas A&M game out, which is the first game that Lagway and Mertz split snaps, and probably, quite honestly, the first game Lagway's ever split snaps with a quarterback. If you just look at his performance against Miami and his performance against Mississippi State and his performance against Central Florida, like it's not even close.
Right.
The guy has played great in those 3 stretches. The A&M game, he was awful. The Samford game, he was unbelievable. But again, Samford, I'm looking at the body of work going, at what point do you start giving that guy more reps? Like, it was funny because Napier talked about giving.
I wanted to go there tonight, and Will, look at you.
Napier talked about giving Pyburn more reps.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he's winning battles. And, he talked, it was interesting. They had Aaron Gates in there. He won some individual battles. Like the real story for me on the defense against UCF was not necessarily that they were like always in the right place. It was that we started to see them actually win some one-on-one battles. There was a third down play where Des Watson just drove the guard back into the running back, and that set up the 4th and 1 that they were able to stop.
So glad you point. I was going to point that play out too. So while we're there, yeah. he pushes guys back, and I think it was Denson and Sapp on that play. They get they get the stats, they get the tackle, but it doesn't happen without Watson pushing his guy back. And look, I know I slammed him a couple of weeks ago, but I do want to make sure you pointed it out. I wanted to point him out too that when there's a play to be made in situations Florida's defense has struggled in, it made a big part of it was because of him.
Well, and Malzahn later on in one of those early drives tries a reverse. And Florida's defense usually gets burned on that because they're all pursuing in one direction. They can't tackle. They don't win the individual battles. It's one-on-one going down, on blocks going down the way. And Florida's defense just loses contain and it ends up a disaster. Aaron Gates did an awesome job of keeping his eyes on KJ Jefferson, beating Jefferson to the point of attack, and blowing up a reverse. I'm like, oh my God, a blown up reverse. They had a play where they blitzed up the middle. And it was actually a simulated pressure, Dave, a simulated pressure where they blitzed up the middle. RJ Moten coming from linebacker. They had Moten playing linebacker. RJ Moten coming from linebacker up the middle. I think it was RJ Harvey was the running back for Central Florida. That dude made a business decision. He olayed that thing like you wouldn't believe. But I'm still sitting there going, pressure up the middle. We never get pressure up the middle. And all of a sudden,
hey, one more, right? You're there. Let's go through some plays. I'm glad you did that because there's another one. Before that third down stop by Watson, it was third and short because Jordan Castell, which he hasn't done a whole lot of this year, comes up in like a missile, makes the tackle on second down to keep it third and short on the very next play. So something we hadn't seen much this year. Jordan Castell being aggressive this year, and then third down stop, fourth down stop. But yeah, certainly. And then another it might have been that same play, Will, where the reverse. Was it DJ Douglas who actually came in and made the tackle, or was it no? It was Gates.
It was Gates who made the tackle.
But so DJ Douglas did have another one in the game too, where we've all slammed him this year, and rightfully so. But one more time, something we haven't seen, and we see it this week. DJ Douglas flying in, making a tackle for a loss. And then, here was the sequence I wanted to point out. It was 3rd and 9 at the Florida 34, obvious passing situation. And we had heard all week about, Billy Napier saying, I remember I asked him about it, and other people asked him about it too, about personnel and who deserves more playing time and all that. And he brought up on his own the pass rush situations and the personnel in that grouping. So here it is, 3rd and 9 at the Florida 34. Will, do you know who's up front on Florida's defensive line? TJ Searcy, Justice Boone, Cam James, George Gumbs Jr. all on the field together. Obvious passing situation. We'll have to go back and look at other games to see if all four of these guys, but that's what they're supposed to be known for. And this is what the situations that you call out. These are the situations these guys are built for. All your best pass rushers are on the field at the same time. And don't get me wrong, it sounds simple, but we haven't seen stuff like this so far this season. But on that 3rd and 9, Gumbs drops into coverage on the right side, wide side of the field as Bryce Thornton comes in from the boundary. Thornton almost gets to Jefferson, and that goes incomplete. So now it's 4th and 9. But you had that personnel generate pressure out there. It's the same personnel on 4th and 9. Boone, Gumbs, Searcy, all in. They all get pressure, and they all get the sack. I mean, so it wasn't just lip service of, hey, we're going to try different personnel groupings. We're going to try and create more pressure. We're going to try and get more sacks. You could see it with your eyes here of this Florida defense being aggressive, playing closer to the line of scrimmage, making sure, hey, Gus, if you're going to beat us, you're going to pass the ball. We're going to load up the box. You're going to have to run in heavy boxes. But personnel groupings, personnel situations, playing smart and stacking a box against a Gus Malzahn offense. I mean, don't get me wrong. We need to see more of it. We want to see more of it, but it was a good starting point. If there's going to be a reset on defense because of that bye week, we got a good starting point and some of the things that they talked about, and then we saw those things.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think probably my favorite defensive moment of the game, I can't even tell you what the defense did, but I just remember they got the running into the kicker and then the 15-yard penalty from Napier. And I was like, oh, my God, they're going to go score a touchdown here. And then they're going to come out at the end of the second half and score another touchdown. And we're going to be sitting here at 24-17 going, Napier, you moron. Like
Hey, history says if we get a penalty in that situation, you're right. The opposing offense usually comes right out and will score right away.
I mean, it's just unbelievable how Florida has been able to shoot themselves in the face so many times in not just the Napier era, in all these different eras. Look, I fully expected the defense to fold after that penalty, and they didn't. They bowed up, they got the stop, they wound up driving Central Florida back, and they get the ball back to DJ Lagway, who then drives down for the field goal. So not only was it something where they were able to get off the field, but they were able to get off the field and then do something on offense on the other side. Now, all that being said, Lagway gets the ball back. Why do you run a quarterback draw or a quarterback power with 17 seconds left and one timeout? Like, there's a lot. So when we talk about the positive, we got to talk about that there's still some things to fix. And
Will,
look, I think
let me stop you right there. Let's hear from Billy. Let's hear from Billy.
All right, let's see if he's got an excuse for that one, because there is no one. There is none.
Not that one in particular, but here's Billy Napier on the Florida offense Saturday night.
We had 3 possessions in the second half. The first one, we had a false start penalty. We had a mental error on third down. We had to punt. The second possession was we got 2nd and 1 holding sack in the fringe. I mean, like inexcusable play, So I think ultimately we shot ourselves in the foot. I mean, they had the ball a lot in the second half, right? So, but the 3 possessions that we did have prior to the 4-minute possession, we screwed it up. We missed the field goal. We had 2 penalties, and then obviously, for us to get sacked, to take a sack in the fringe on that D&D is inexcusable. We got to do much better there.
Yeah, well, I made sure to point out those sequences there in the second half on the post-game breakdown. Hey, as we talk about the word momentum, Saturday night was another example of it. All the momentum. Not all the momentum. The offense had a good first half. I wouldn't say it was excellent by any means, but a good first half. But you couldn't carry that over into the second half, and part of that is going to the sequence you were about to discuss. I think that was right before halftime, I believe. But penalties paired with a more conservative play calling approach, to really just run it at Central Florida in the second half. You can't, if you're going to play that way, you can't shoot yourself in the foot. As you kind of alluded to earlier, Will, the margin for error for this offense is not great. And when you shoot yourselves in the foot, Florida wasted some opportunities there in the second half. But, I will agree with Billy Napier to a point that there was a lot of shooting themselves in the foot, but it was paired with some very conservative play calling.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things there. The fact that they only had 3 possessions in the second half is indicative of the fact that they couldn't get off the field. Right, that they were able to stop Central Florida down in the red zone. So UCF opens with a drive down to the Florida red zone, uses half the quarter, and ends up settling for a field goal, which is a different. Central Florida fans should be upset with their coach for the way that drive went.
If we're going to criticize Florida coaching for this, if you're a UCF podcast right now, it's going to take you 2 hours to go through that one.
Yeah, but nobody listens to those, so we're okay. But look, so here's what I'll say. Florida won the second quarter of this game. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So from a yardage perspective, 81-70 in the first quarter, they lead 7-3. Then 170-49 in the second quarter, they're up 24-3. 50-78 in terms of yards in the third quarter, and 59-76. So Florida was even in the first quarter, dominated the second quarter, and then got beat in the third quarter and the fourth quarter. Not great, Bob. At some point, there needs to be some consistency across the board the whole way through. And in many ways, and you sort of jumped on it when I said it earlier, I think this is indicative of what's going on at the quarterback position. Is they're still sort of feeling for what they want to be, and they're different when they have Lagway on the field than when they have Mertz on the field, but they're not willing to embrace either one. And without embracing who they are and really forging that identity on the offensive side of the ball, I think they're going to continue to struggle. And if you're only going to get 3 possessions and a half, and your best player, or at least your most explosive player, only gets one of those possessions, you get one false start, and you completely wasted the second half. I mean, and I don't know, man. I look at it and I go, I really admire what Graham Mertz brings to the table. but he's limited. And I don't know that you can be limited given some of the limitations Florida has on defense and given who's coming up on the schedule and expect to survive. And I hope I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. And, Napier talked about Pyburn needing to be on the field more often, and he's talked about getting different guys out there who need more time. And certainly I think has taken some criticism as he's made those comments. But let's be honest, man. The guy who needs to get on the field is DJ Lagway. And if you sink because he can't get the job done, then you sink. But given what's coming, given what's on the horizon, I mean, I understand why you would start Mertz against Tennessee on the road. I get it. I'm not expecting there to be a change. But this once out of every 3 drives stuff, when the guy on the 3rd drive is putting points up all the time, is really ridiculous. Like, I actually would understand if in the first half he just hadn't played Lagway.
Yeah.
Because the offense was playing very, very well through Mertz. But man, like, there are times when it stops. And the thing I kept going back to is that the checkdown especially that I mentioned earlier, those sorts of things mean that, yes, he's 19 of 23, but the 2 deep shots that Mertz took were balls he threw out of bounds. He had one-on-one opportunities on the outside, and he threw them in a place where his receiver had no opportunity to make a catch, make a back shoulder catch, draw a penalty, nothing, right? And if you're just going to waste those deep shot opportunities, then the dinking and dunking doesn't really do you a whole lot of good. And that's why Florida's offense stalled in the second half. The reason it stalled is that the dinking and dunking, at some point you make one mistake and the drive falters, and that's the false start. So Napier keeps talking about shooting himself in the foot, but he's putting himself in a position where the shot kills the drive, as opposed to, like, we all remember how it felt in 2020. It was like 3rd and 14. Well, that's all right. Trask will get it. like no problem. And it's amazing following an offense that does that, right? Where you're like, 3rd and 14, not a big deal. We got this. Like, we convert these all the time. And like I said, Florida starts 4-4 on 3rd down, ends up 2 of 9 for the rest of the game. They get the 1 4th down conversion, which is sort of if you're going to be ultra conservative and try to drain the clock, that's a weird choice, right? To call a QB keeper with Mertz, or at least a read option with Mertz on a 4th and 1 in your own territory. I don't mind the 4th down call if it goes in line with everything else you're doing in terms of, hey, we're putting our foot on the gas. But if you're just going to rely on your defense and you're going to let them run out the clock, it doesn't fit with that strategy. So it's just interesting that, that it feels like there's a puzzle being put together, but the pieces don't quite fit. And it's like, we can try to jam those pieces in and pretend like the puzzle looks nice. But even so, even watching this UCF game, you're like, those puzzles aren't all in the right pieces. And, the Pyburn piece moved, and hey, maybe that one's in the right spot now. And the Triquez Bridges piece moved, and maybe that's in the right spot now. And the 4 defensive linemen, where you got Cam James and Justice Boone and Pyburn and Searcy out there. Okay, like, that piece looks like it's in the right spot. But there's a big freaking piece that needs to get put into the right spot for this season to turn around and be a significant winning season for Florida. And it's going to be too late if that piece doesn't get moved. And at some point you got to push your chips in the middle. And I'm just wondering when Billy's going to do that, because he's going to need to do it at some point in the not too distant future.
So Will, Graham Mertz was 19 of 23. He was 8 for 8. So that means there were 8 attempts at screen passes at or behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. His average no, I mean, I actually said this the other day after the Mississippi State game. I was like, welcome back to 2023 Graham Mertz. And that's not a slight at Mertz. It's a recognition that in order to win, you need to do that. Like, you have to go with that sort of strategy in order to get things done.
But in these games coming up, Will, you're only going to win that way if the run game is also there.
Well, and the run game wasn't even there against Florida, or Central Florida, right?
It wasn't.
And so therein lies everything, right? We start talking about some of the limitations and all those different things. And there are limitations with Mertz. And this isn't like a knock on Mertz. I like Mertz a lot. But there are some limitations there, and it's okay to acknowledge that happens sometimes, right? And that he's not that there are just limitations. And, you look at he's got 5 turnover worthy plays this year. They were all on throws down the field, and they all came in those first 2 games against A&M and Miami. But if you look at his average depth of target, it was 11.7 against the Hurricanes, 9.5 against A&M, 5.1 against Mississippi State, and 5.8 against Central Florida. So he has been incredibly effective at what they've asked him to do. But what he's being asked to do is not going to put up more than 24 points. So if you think you can win with 24 points against Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss.
Hey, Will, do you have it? What was South Carolina last year?
What was it? What was his average depth of target?
Yeah,
I'll have to look. Hold on, I gotta find it. Let
Okay,
me go to the right year here.
Yeah. So while you do that, I'll continue on. No verticality in Mertz's game for whatever reason. I don't. My thing is he just doesn't trust it, or of course he's playing within the offense, kind of like you said, but the offense is already conservative in a lot of aspects. So I think that's part of the problem as well. He is conservative in a conservative offense. That's why I say that the offense has to go through the run game if Mertz is going to play like this. He is, truly going to give what the defense takes, and maybe even to a fault. So, look, there'll be some vertical routes and some chances, but he isn't going to take them often. We all know they tried to focus it, as you brought it up, Will, against Miami and a lot versus Miami, but it just wasn't there. So, that's why, for the most part, I think if he's going to be that type of quarterback, the run game is going to have to be there. And then, like the South Carolina game, we're talking about wins. How do you win? I would assume, but based off of that, it was probably pretty higher in that game last year.
Yeah, so in the South Carolina game, his average depth target was 11.2, but that was sandwiched with 7.5 at Kentucky, 6.7 against Georgia, 7.2 against Arkansas, 6.5 against LSU, and 6 against Missouri. So, and South Carolina's pass defense last year was just awful, right? So they were able to take advantage of that. The bigger thing for me is that if you think Graham Mertz was bad at Wisconsin, his average depth of target there was 7.1 his freshman year, or his redshirt freshman year, then 9.8 in 2021, 10.6 in 2022. Those were years where he was turning the ball over a bunch. So he threw 10 interceptions in 2022. He threw 11 interceptions in 2021. He threw 3 interceptions last year for Florida, 6.7 average depth of target. This year he's at 7.7 overall, has 2 interceptions, but those 2 interceptions came in those 2 games where his average depth of target was much higher. So what this really comes down to, and I think this is fundamentally what we sort of found out about Graham Mertz in those first couple of games, is he is like, you can call plays where he's going to take those shots down the field, where you're going to extend what he can do. But what you're doing when you do that is you're opening yourself up to turnovers. And at Wisconsin, he showed that when he started to go downfield, the turnovers went up. Last year, they protected him by having very, very low average depth of target, and he didn't turn the ball over very much. This year, early on, turns the ball over early, and it really sort of turned those games, right? Or not, at least made it to the point where Florida wasn't able to turn around. Now, part of the reason that the average depth of target was higher in those games is Florida was behind, right? Florida was behind. Well, they had to start going down the field.
But against Miami, you could tell there was an early focus in that game to try and do it.
Well, and they talked about it all off season too, right? Which is fundamentally also, I think, one of the things that maybe frustrates people about Billy Napier is it's not like the Wisconsin stats don't exist, right? You could look at it and say, as he goes downfield, he becomes more turnover prone. And you got to weigh that risk reward. I wrote an article called The Mertz Conundrum back in February, really sort of looking at this. And yes, Dave, his stats in terms of, like, I think he was throwing something like 69% of his passes within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage last year. And against Miami, it was like 75 it was more like 40% were within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. And then against Mississippi State, it was like 75% were back there. And if you look at the Central Florida game, I think you'll see probably in that 70 to 75% range as well. And that's just what you have to do to avoid the turnovers and move the chains. But you have to be absolutely impeccable on third down in order to make sure that the drive continues. And the benefit of a guy like DJ Lagway Look, there's a drawback there too, right? There's a risk reward there too.
Mhm.
Lagway is not going through his progressions like Mertz. Well, not like Mertz does, but he's not going through his progressions like you would want a seasoned quarterback to do it. There are a lot of very simple type of first read balls out. He did run around quite a bit, way too much against Texas A&M, and sort of got himself in trouble there. So it's not as though DJ Lagway doesn't have warts, but the upside on Lagway that we've seen so far, this really does remind me of 2021 in many ways, where we had Emory Jones, and you looked at the offense, you're like, the offense isn't terrible, but every time Anthony Richardson comes in, it's an 80-yard touchdown. Like, surely we can get this guy more playing time. Like, surely he shouldn't come in 1 out of every 3 drives. Like, that was always the funny thing to me, is Richardson would come in and rip off an 85-yard run. And then the next drive, they'd be like, let's go back to Emory Jones. Like, wait a minute. Like, you gave Richardson 1 play, and it was the best play of the game, and we're going to take him out. Like, that's the thing that I think is just perplexing to me. Like, Lagway comes out, executes exactly what you want. He does exactly what you need, and then you sit him for 2 more drives, and then you bring him in with 40 seconds left, and you mangle the clock management.
Hey, with that, at least there's some trust to bring him in that situation still. I mean, don't get me wrong, that they are sticking to that plan, and it just happens to turn out where, twice last week, it's within your 10-yard line. So you trust him. You trust him there. You trust him right before halftime. Trust him to give him more snaps.
Well, let me ask you, Dave. Do they trust him, or are they too chicken to tell Mertz and Lagway the truth and actually have them earn their playing time? Because I think if you asked Napier in a quiet moment, he would tell you, well, Graham hasn't done anything to lose his job. And I think that's actually true. He hasn't done anything to lose. Like, he has not been, other than the Miami game, he has not been worse than he was last year.
Right.
But he also hasn't taken a step forward. And so
I'm guilty of that. I thought he would. You were right. Didn't think he would. I thought there would be some jump. There really hasn't been.
It's the same quarterback.
Yeah.
And again, that's not a terrible thing.
Right.
But
we knew how much better Florida had to be this year.
Well, so what has Lagway done? Like, has Lagway earned more playing time? And to me, that throw he made against Central Florida should earn him some more playing time. Effectively running a drive with 48 seconds left in the half should earn him more playing time. Like, at what point
two 90-yard drives the week before should earn you more playing time?
The drive against Miami, where he came out and was facing the first team Hurricanes defense and drives down the field for a touchdown. Like, there are a lot of things that I look at and go, that guy's earned more playing time. And so to sit there and go, oh, well, Jack Pyburn's doing some really useful things, we should get him on the field. Well, you're the head coach. You get to decide who plays. Like, you get to decide that he's out on the field. And I do wonder, when are we going to have an honest conversation, or when is the staff going to have an honest conversation about, we love Graham Mertz and what he stands for and what he's done for this program. And no, he hasn't done anything to lose his job. But DJ Lagway has done some stuff to earn part of that job too. And when do those streams cross? And, the problem for Napier is that he has an opportunity. Like, if he started Lagway against Tennessee and Florida pulls an upset, the tone of the program, the tone of like where this program's headed, the tone of like everything around it changes. Now, I think Napier would tell you that he doesn't listen to the outside noise and that he's not making decisions based on, narrative and outside noise. But, look, the narrative matters when you're in this position, which is, if they'd have lost to Central Florida, Billy Napier wouldn't be the coach. Mm-hmm. So it's, we're teetering right on the edge here of what needs to be done. I don't think they brought in Lagway with 48 seconds because they trust Lagway. I think they brought in Lagway with 48 seconds because that's what they'd said they were going to do before the game started.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't think that's the right way to make decisions when you've got a guy with that kind of talent who's performing the way he's performing sitting there on the bench.
Yeah, I even think you can see it with the opposing defenses. I think defenses back off. The run game opens up a little bit more. when Lagway's there because they have to worry about him vertical. They have to worry about him running. So I do think it helps the offense just overall as well because defenses have to worry about him.
Well, they don't throw any screens. Like the offense changes. They just like don't throw them when he's in there. And it's like, I mean, that's hyperbole, obviously. But
But to your point, there's just more potential in this offense when he's out there.
Well, and they're giving him the opportunity to take those shots, right? Like it's not like they're sitting there making him run the Graham Mertz offense and saying, oh, he's got his handcuffs on and we won't let him do anything. Either they're trying to do it, he refuses and keeps taking the deep shots. Maybe that's why they won't play him more because they're like, oh, that guy doesn't listen to us. It's like, but damn, it turns into a bunch of touchdowns. Now, given the personalities, I don't necessarily think that's the case. But look, I'm glad that these guys can sing Kumbaya and look at their iPad on the sideline while they're rotating in and out. But damn it, I want to see a quarterback who could put up 40 points.
Yeah.
And the way things have gone thus far, Lagway is the only guy who's going to be able to get Florida there. And look, I'm very pleased at what we saw from the defense against Central Florida.
Yeah, me too.
But you're going to need to score 40 points to beat Tennessee. And, I went on a rant about Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago when I meant to say Tennessee. But the thing I loved about that Tennessee game 2 years ago was Napier basically said, Anthony Richardson and going forward on fourth down is how we're going to win this game. And look, we're probably going to lose it. But we are going to go balls to the wall, full tilt. We are going after it. And there's an opportunity to do that this week. And I don't think he's going to take it. And I think at the end of the day, that is going to be the epitaph on the Billy Napier era is you could have taken the shot and you didn't. And that's why you're not here anymore. And that it's aggravating because I want the team to win. I want to see what Lagway can do. And I think there's an opportunity to get him there, but I worry that they just haven't prepared him to be able to step in and to be able to excel in these circumstances because he's only been getting, 8, 9, 10 snaps a game and 4 throws. I mean, what else you want from him? 4 of 4 for 50 yards, a 205 QB rating. He's running for positive yards as well. He's got more passing yards than Graham Mertz does this year.
By 1 yard, I think. I saw that today. But still, going to how many snaps? And it's still 1 more yard.
Yep. Yeah, and just from an effectiveness perspective, again, I go back to 10 points on 3 drives, and you're going to get 9 drives in a game. So 10 points on 3 drives, you score 30 points. Mertz had 6 drives, scored 14 points. So in 9 drives, you're going to score 21. 30 is more than 21. It's I'm an analytics guy, but that seems.
We all know Gators Breakdown and Read Reaction and Dave and Will. We love our numbers. Then there you go.
Was that a 5-star? I'm not sure that was a 5-star stat. Sykes would be upset at me for that being the stat that I break out. And to the point of what we were talking about earlier. So Lagway's average depth of target is 11.1 this year. And, I think maybe in the A&M game, he got a little bit out of sorts and his average depth of target was 12.8. So he was definitely going downfield in that one. But again, 14 attempts in that one. So we're not talking about somebody who was airing it out in that one. And look, I mean, he's your hope. Like I've talked about for months now that college football is about wins and it's about hope. And so Billy Napier has to do one or the other, right? Graham Mertz has to get him a bunch of wins, or DJ Lagway is going to have to provide a bunch of hope. And those are the only paths to Billy Napier being the coach next year. And it seems unwise to just, pass on the second one, hoping that you'll get the first one. But hey, that's why we watch the games. I'm hoping Mertz comes out, puts up a huge performance against Tennessee, and Florida's able to win that one. But you're crazy if you think I'm not picking the Vols.
No, right. We do have an opposing guest in here. Big Vol Daddy does say go Vols. Willie brings up a good point. Both coaches need this game. And after last week and then the loss to Arkansas there for Josh Heupel, losing to Florida and Billy Napier last year as well, probably should not be overlooked. Could he really lose 2 games in a row to Billy Napier with Billy Napier and Florida going through what they're going through right now? And then I think Tennessee has Bama next week as well. So I want to say 2 tough game stretch here, but it would be 3-game tough stretch. Just they lost to Arkansas as well. But yeah, you can certainly see both angles, both coaches certainly needing this one. It's not the 90s anymore. Florida and Tennessee doesn't. I mean, with some within the fan base would think so, but national, they're not the. Neither team can be consistently good enough for this to feel any close to the 90s. But yeah, both coaches, I think, coming into this one, Billy Napier to get some good mojo, some momentum built for this Florida program that he desperately needs in year 3 to turn this thing around. But yeah, after that loss to Arkansas last week, when Tennessee was pretty much on top of the world, I mean, I was putting them up there with Texas and Georgia and Alabama. I thought Tennessee was going to be there. Look, they still may be in the end. Alabama had a bad week last week too. But that's the point of all this, is both coaches need this. Heupel needs to kind of get over last week a bit. You got Florida at home. I'm sure they smell blood with how bad Florida has been against Miami and Texas A&M. But at the same time, maybe Florida rolls in. I mean, we've seen some good Florida or some good Tennessee teams lose to some Florida teams they probably shouldn't have in Knoxville. Some average Vols team lose to a bad Florida team in Knoxville as well. So Florida, ever since the 90s, and we go back there, Florida has had a pretty good outcome, whether it be in the Swamp or in Knoxville. But right here, I'm sure Tennessee's licking the wounds and trying to get back on the right side of things. That really starts with Josh Heupel there as we talk about these two coaches.
Well, hell, they lost to Florida last year, so we can't exactly talk about this being a team that's going to be able to just roll the ball out and get a win. And I think in many ways that's sort of the story of the SEC this year, is you can't just roll the ball out and get a win, even if you're Alabama. And, DeBoer played a ton of one-score games last year at Washington. And actually on an episode of Stand Up and Holler this week, Nick and I were going back and forth about Bama. And I was like, he's going to get bit pretty soon, because you can't play that many one-score games and not get bit. And, lo and behold, next week against Vanderbilt, it's a one-score game. You get the 4th and 1 play where Vanderbilt hits the long touchdown. And, that could go either way. But it turns out that when you play these close games, every once in a while, those things go against you. Now, here's what I will say about this Tennessee game specifically. And you mentioned Big Vol Daddy being here in the chat. He said, Florida better start and play the entire game. Mertz, he killed us last year. That is a tongue-in-cheek comment from Big Vol Daddy, I guarantee you. And I think, I'll sit there and talk about film.
And also what happened, though, we'll go back to my earlier point. Florida ran the ball well in that first half of that game.
I mean, ETN's the reason they won that game, right?
Yes,
so, but I love looking at film and trying to break stuff down. I love looking at stats and trying to figure out what stats are important for all these different things. But there is one thing that I think you really shouldn't ignore when it comes to the football gods, which is you don't want to do what your opponent wants you to do. So when your opponent says, keep Jim McElwain, you go, no, get that guy out of here. When your opponent says we want to play against Grammar, no, it's time to make a change. When your opponent goes, oh, your defense is fierce, keep your defensive coordinator. No, it's time to make some changes. So, look, Tennessee's got a really good defense. Tennessee, third overall in the country, 3.7 yards per play allowed against FBS opponents. That game against Arkansas, certainly the defense played well enough and the offense struggled. I think, when you've got a true freshman quarterback on offense, you're going to have some hiccups from time to time, especially when you're on the road. But look, I mean, Alabama lost on the road. Georgia lost last week on the road to Alabama.
He's a redshirt freshman, by the way.
Well, you have Tennessee. Okay, yes. You have Tennessee losing on the road. I think there is a common theme there, and I don't think that we should ignore it, which is that now you got Florida going on the road. Florida is going to have to play better than they have played in these home games that they've played this year. And they haven't played real well in their home games, but they're going to have to play really, really well to get the job done. And they're probably going to have some luck too. And if I'm looking at this game, I'm saying, yeah, Tennessee's offense is pretty good, but their defense has been awesome. And you think about Florida's offensive line and where it's struggled, and Tennessee's defensive line and the havoc they've created. And, I said this, I picked Florida to beat Miami against my better judgment. And I'm not doing that this week. Like, I'm just not. This is a far superior Vols team. And, irrespective of the loss last week, I don't think that changes. And so Florida's going to have to do something special. Part of that, hopefully, is more time for Lagway. Part of that is this defensive improvement, like taking another step, like not just the step for UCF, but actually taking another step.
Yes.
And then part of it is probably getting 2 or 3 turnovers and the Vols fans puckering up and, it getting really tense. And all of a sudden, their playoff hopes are on the line because you lose to Arkansas and you lose to Florida. I'm not sure you can run the table and still make the playoff at that point. And so, this is one of those where all of a sudden,
man, that would be so weird if they did, because that would mean wins over Bama and Georgia. But
but it would also mean that the regular season means nothing, which has always been my contention. I saw Bud Elliott had his playoff out, his too early playoff out today, and Bama's not on it. So a win over Georgia, but that loss to Vanderbilt, takes Bama out of his consideration, at least for who's going to be there. Now, let's be honest. The TV networks want Bama in there, and Bama will be in there if the only loss they have is Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that a loss to a team that is considered inferior is going to have a huge impact on where these teams stand in their pecking order within the playoff. And so Tennessee has an awful lot to play for coming into this one. And, Florida, I think, is going to have to do something special to come out with a win. And, like I said, I'm not going to be picking it, but it's the defense for Tennessee that worries me. Like, I think with the limitations Florida has on offense, this is a game where I can see, the 11 points against Utah last year is sort of the kind of offensive performance you might get out of the Gators. And, that did not go well for Florida last year.
I mean, look, we'll end it here, of course. Look, momentum, that's what it is. It's been rare, but look, it's time for more. If this thing's going to change the narrative in any way for Billy Napier and the program under him, look, I don't care what Miami and Texas A&M, I don't care that they've had pretty good seasons so far. It was at the detriment of you. So, if this thing was headed in the right direction, Florida would be discussed like those teams are right now. So this is a time to change that. There's a long way to go for Billy Napier, kind of to dig out of this hole. And look, he has started that process with 2 wins the last couple of games, but more is needed. Go beat a good Tennessee team. Go be a rival. Ride a wave of momentum and start to change the narrative. Napier expressed a lot of disappointment with the performance so far this season, and mainly because he says this team hasn't lived up to his expectation. Well, Will, if that team is anywhere near that, we need to see that Saturday. So, yes, the schedule eased up. You got some wins versus Mississippi State, UCF, 2 of the worst teams that'll be on Florida's schedule. And I know Tennessee just lost to Arkansas, but they're returning home. Good rushing attack, play good defense, as you said. They'll be ready for this one. So it's time, if you're Billy Napier, to find a way to win. You've dug yourself this hole. So if you want to work here, if you want this to work here at Florida, you got to start winning games you're probably not supposed to. And a road win over Tennessee, well, you've made that necessary. Unfortunately, you've made that necessary with what we've seen so far this season. So, that's momentum's a weird, fickle word, as we have said. But for any chance of it, a win's got to happen Saturday.
It's prove it season, man.
It is.
It's prove it season.
You've proved something where you're not as bad as Mississippi State. You're not as bad as UCF. Now there's prove it mode for taking the next step.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll see.
So I said it's time. I said it was going to happen.
Oh, boy.
Yes, I won't be picking Florida either. But.
I'm not sure anybody will. I mean, is Florida still a 20-point dog in this one? This
15.
one opened up as a 20-point line.
15.5 last I saw.
Oh, man. So it has moved a little bit towards Florida.
So
everybody saw the defense.
I didn't see 20. I think I saw 16 and 15.5.
Yeah, I thought 20 came out a couple of weeks ago after the loss to A&M. But anyway.
Oh, okay. Maybe then. Okay, my bad. I was just thinking of yesterday.
Yeah, well, I mean, all that means is some people decided, oh, maybe that defense isn't so bad. And I have a sneaking suspicion they're going to be proven wrong. Look, I mean, I think even in the I haven't had a chance to look at the all 22 or as close as I can get to the all 22. But there were a couple of plays in this one where KJ Jefferson was getting pressured and there were guys open in the secondary. And so that fundamentally is going to be the key for Florida's defense is they need the defensive line to be able to get pressure in order to make sure that at certain times that Nico isn't able to keep his eyes downfield and hit those guys downfield. And he will make mistakes. Like Nico's turned the ball over. They have struggled at times to
he'll
be consistent.
run out of bounds. He'll run out of bounds on the last play of the game
on fourth down. Yeah, that's not great. Great there, Bob. It's bold strategy, Cotton. But I mean, look, I think what would you put this one at? 90-10?
85-50.
Well, you're basically giving yourself that extra 5 because it's like the ghosts of Florida past.
The ghosts of Florida past.
Where it's like, we don't ever lose to Tennessee. Like it's our birthright to beat the Vols. Like, every once in a while they win and then they just like post that same meme of who was it? Juwan Jennings in the gray uniforms running downfield that we got to see for like 5 straight years while we were beating them 4 straight years there. I mean, God, that terrible Florida team in 2021 beat them. The team last year beat them. It's like, granted, both of the no. The 2021 team was in Knoxville, right? That was the one. Was that no?
Yeah, Avery Jones. Yeah, it was Florida controlled them.
Oh my God! Like I
think that was Heupel's first year, right?
Yeah. So they've come a ways, and look, I think I actually am happy that Tennessee has gotten a little bit better because it's good to have the Vols good when Florida beats them. Like beating Tennessee and it meaning nothing really kind of sucks. But the problem is we're sort of at the, I think I said jokingly a couple of weeks ago, it's the Derek Dooley era at Florida right now in terms of who we've got at head coach and what we're seeing out on the field. And this is his opportunity to turn that around, and we'll see if he can do it. I hope he can. I'm rooting for Napier. I want him to be able to do it. But, man, is he on a razor's edge? And, I'm really hoping we see something explosive out of this team we haven't seen so far because I think they're going to need it in order to win this one.
That's a good point. If Florida does win this game, I think it will kind of be a fun win because, like to your point, you probably got to score 40. I'd love to see the defense shut them down similar to last year. I would too. I don't think that's going to be the case, especially with Tennessee at home. And I know a lot of people will say, "Oh, they play a lot better at home than." I mean, that's most SEC teams, but at the same time, their schedule at home this year has not been the greatest. So they should be putting up 70 points against who they've been playing at home. It should be if Florida wins, it should be a fun win. I guess either way, because that means the defense probably played good, or the offense just won in the shootout, which we don't necessarily really see happening. But
honestly, I think if Florida wins, it's because Nico craps the bet. I think that's the reality is that if Florida's going to win, it's going to be because Tennessee's quarterback presses, turns the ball over, Florida gets up early and is able to sort of deflate the balloon, kind of like they did against Central Florida and like they did against Tennessee last year. Yeah. I think that there's Florida is not an elite defense, but they do seem to be able to, in some capacity, play a conservative enough game plan that they can make you burn clock in order to score. I mean, last year's Florida team, it was like if it took you more than 90 seconds to score, you were a terrible offense. So this year's Florida defense at least seems to be able, early on against Miami, they were able to at least slow down the Hurricanes, and then sort of the wheels came off there after a turnover and some other things. So we'll see. I mean, I think that's probably the best we can hope for from Florida's defense is sort of slow down the Vols offense and make them take a bunch of time in order to score. But that sort of goes back to my other point, which is you're then going to have a limited number of possessions, and you got to get the maximum that you can out of those limited possessions if that's the limitation on your defense. So like just having a low scoring game doesn't do you a whole lot if the low scoring game comes with 7 total possessions on offense. Because, your defense kept them to, say, 24 points, but 24 points on 7 possessions really ain't that great. 24 points on 12 possessions is awesome. So, depending upon how Tennessee gets to those sorts of points, but there are no moral victories at this point. I'm not going to come back and say Florida lost 24-21. Oh, it's okay. You got to start winning the
Yes.
freaking game. And so we'll see if Florida can do it.
I will say, and then this would be, a lot of the preview would be this. This is more of a test in Florida's run defense than UCF was. I mean, they were very similar anyway, and UCF's schedule was putrid up to that point. So, it was the Tennessee can run the ball. Tennessee can run the ball with a similar talent profile. So, to me, that's why it's better than UCF. You were able to out-talent UCF. So I think this will be more of a test to see if Florida's run defense is in a much better situation than they found themselves coming into the UCF game. Saw some improvement there. This is a bigger test there in Knoxville. So there we go. Good stuff, Will. Preview Wednesday, Thursday, I guess.
Yep.
Somewhere around there.
We'll have a preview out on Wednesday or Thursday. Stand Up and Holler coming out this week as well, where we'll be previewing the game a little bit, and then we do a post game recap live for all these things. So we'll do that for Tennessee this week, and then recap article on Sunday, which is usually that's the most fun. I enjoy writing that one, where we go look at the film and try to decide what was sort of the main theme in terms of what happened. So hopefully
night games.
Yeah, hopefully I'm eating some crow as I'm at 2 a.m. writing about how Florida's offense under Graham Mertz was electric and could not be stopped by the Vol defense. I'm not holding my breath on that one, but hopefully that's the case. And like I said, I'm rooting. I don't root against my team.
Right.
I want Florida to win. I want Florida to win big. I would love to put a stake in the heart of the Vols fans and send them packing from playoff contention. And hell, I gotta be honest, if Florida wins this game and is sitting there 4-2, having sort of turned things, having quote unquote turned things around. I don't know. Florida ranked if they go out and dominate against Tennessee.
Ooh.
Because their 2 losses will be top 15 teams.
I was about to say it because you're not getting any excuse for me from losing those teams because it was blowouts. But I can see voters being like, okay, Miami, A&M, good teams. That's Florida's only 2 losses. Granted, blowouts. I could see it, I guess.
Slide in there at 24-25, get our hopes up to then get just absolutely smacked by Kentucky the next week. That'd be awesome.
Oh, that word momentum. Hey, I hope that's what we're talking about this time next week. So
it would be nice to talk about a winning streak.
It would be. It was like I said, there has not been a 3-game P4, P5 winning streak for Billy Napier yet. So
what is that quote from Bull Durham where the coach is like, "Congratulations, you've won the game tonight. If you win tomorrow, that'll be 2 in a row. You win the one after that, that's what we call a winning streak." It's been a long time since we've been able to talk about a winning streak in Florida circles. So, hey, maybe we can get there. That'd be nice.
Yep. I don't know what the rest of the week holds for me. So I don't. Jacksonville, of course, I'm on the edge of it. So it can be pretty bad. It could be just a nuisance. Who knows? So I'm doing a lot of work on Tuesday to try and get out in front of it. So we'll see what the rest of the week holds out there. So everybody be safe out there. Will, good stuff, man.
Yeah, man. Stay safe in Jacksonville. Stay safe in Tampa, Fort Myers, Clearwater, Orlando, wherever this thing hits. I mean, it's this one's pretty scary. I mean, this is one where it's going to hit the state, and it's going to hit some people you love and care about, and it looks like it might be one of those 1 in 100-year type of things. So certainly, everybody stay safe out there. We'll do the best we can to cover the Gators throughout. To take everybody's minds off of it when we can, but just know you're in our thoughts and prayers, and up here in Philadelphia, I'll be rooting for everybody to come through okay on the back end.
Sounds good. Will Miles right there at Will Miles SEC Read and Reaction. I'm the host of Gators Breakdown right here, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining us on this episode of Gators Breakdown.